Like, just where's your stress level at? Because honestly, it just continues to get higher and higher. And what are the chances that it's actually connected to things that happened to you in the past that you have not actually had a space and adaptively coped with, processed through, and started to accept and integrate into who you are?
This is why mental health is so taboo and why it's so stigmatized against, because we believe that, your mental health is just something that you did to yourself and you need to just get yourself out of it. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
And it's Emilia.
Welcome to another episode of Evolve Ventures, where we are helping growth-minded humans evolve by breaking one limiting belief at a time. We hope you enjoyed the last episode, number 277, Motivation Monday, the 3 ways to be heard. For today, 278, do you know what happened to you? Emilia and I were kind of pitching and catching a little bit before we dove into this episode because we really wanted to check in with each other and see, what is going to make this episode the best it can be. What do we want all of you who are listening to this taking away from this, and what's going to be really important to talk about that maybe you won't get to hear somewhere else? And what we said and what this episode is going to be is more of a dialogue between Emilia and I, talking about mental health and mental health crises and trauma, and the fact that there are so many more of us struggling with our mental health, struggling due to trauma, struggling with whatever the case may be, and not enough of us are talking about it. There's not enough of a dialogue around it, and we all feel like we can't talk about it. So this is going to be a dialogue kind of in hopes of giving all of you the permission to finally talk about what happened to you, and to really hopefully feel safe enough to have your voice be heard and to get help if you need it.
Yeah. What I was just thinking about was, like, what are the stats around trauma-informed schools? So, again,
None.
this well, I think that it's coming around. And
Minimal.
the reason why I asked that is because someone who's listening to this episode, when we're kind of getting into this dialogue around and really just spreading awareness, we're going to pull in some stats here that I think are really critical for this dialogue, and certainly transcoding that in a way that makes sense to all of us. And how does that actually impact us? I mean, when you think about it, just to start, one out of 5 adults have a mental illness or disorder. Like, 1 out of every 5. And they're living with that every single day. And yet, I want all of us to think about the last 5 conversations that we've had with the people that are in our life. How many of those were actually talking about mental health? I would put money on the fact that it wasn't at all even approached in the conversation.
You know what I think a big dilemma is too? You hear a stat like 1 in 5, and it's like nobody would actually think that they're struggling. Everyone's like, well, I'm not the one. It's like, you probably are. In fact, it's probably higher than that. People don't want to identify with having a mental illness or having mental health challenges. Depression is a mental illness.
Yeah.
Anxiety is a mental illness. Social anxiety. All of these things that none of us want to acknowledge, but we're all struggling with it. I guarantee if we actually ran a poll or ran stats on every single person in the United States and just started there, the stats would be higher. But they're gathering this data off of the people who are willing to acknowledge it. What about the people who aren't willing to acknowledge it? the people who aren't ready or safe enough or just are so avoidant of it that they can't talk about it, that they're really struggling.
Or like the families that grew up with a definition of like trauma is only if you got your body mangled in a car accident, or if you had gone to war and your entire unit, didn't come back and you were the only one, like that's,
Or
the
violent
converse.
sexual assault or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, the conversations that we have with so many different people, it's definitely like it's opened up my eyes to how much the need of this dialogue really is in the world, because to this episode title, like, do you know what happened to you? I mean, so many people go about their lives and never acknowledge what had happened to them. Yet 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness. And if we start to look at the stats, which we're going to start to pull in around domestic violence, assault, PTSD, suicide rates, rape victims, like all of those numbers aren't just numbers. They're human beings that are experiencing events that are happening to them. And instead of asking the question, which this is something that we talk about all the time, what is wrong with you? When someone's not functioning well in society, or not functioning well in their family, or not functioning well, whatever that standard is, in a relationship, instead of asking that question, what is wrong with you? Let's start to ask the question of what happened to you. I'm so for that, because then we don't just see things in such a binary standpoint. We actually start to see things with humans in front of us that are experiencing things, who have experienced things that has literally rewired their neurochemistry. And that's the human that you're seeing in front of you, who might be disorganized, who might be anxious, who might be going through a depressive disorder, who might be experiencing flashbacks of their trauma experiences, you know?
I think what's important too is trauma and, um the precipitating factors that lead to mental health challenges like depression, like anxiety, like whatever else. It looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, you and I talked about the fact that we've both been sexually assaulted, that we both have had experiences of that. Mine looks
Mm-hmm.
very different from yours, though. And
Yeah.
if I were to tell myself, well, mine didn't look like hers, someone didn't, okay, if you have kids around you, I am going to say a trigger warning, okay? Someone didn't pin me down and like
Mm-hmm.
force me and rip my clothes off, but I was manipulated into it. I was
Mm-hmm.
coerced. I was a lot younger than I would have wanted to be, and I was manipulated into it, and then I was threatened, and then eventually I was physically threatened and
Yeah.
forced to do things I didn't want to do. That was my sexual assault experience. But if I said, well, it didn't look like yours, so it isn't justifiable, which unfortunately happens to a lot of people. It's
Right.
like, well, I was only in a car accident. It wasn't that bad. It's not like I went to war. Or it's
Right.
like, well, my parents didn't nurture me. Well, oh, boo-hoo, mommy and daddy didn't love me. And we shame ourselves so much into believing that, oh, well, it's not as bad as we think. It's not as bad as maybe other people, so don't complain. Don't talk
Mm-hmm.
about it. And we're in an
Right.
entire culture of that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I want to throw some stats out here. And again, I want us thinking about the human beings that are underneath this. And so I don't say this lightly. So just the number of domestic violence cases. 1 in every 3 women in their lifetime experience domestic violence. 1 in every 4 men. For PTSD, you have, out of 100 people, at least 6 will experience PTSD in their lifetime. 77% of suicides are by men.
Completed
90
suicides, not suicide
completed
attempts,
suicide.
completed
Yep.
suicide.
Yep. 90% of adult rape victims are female. 16 to 19 years old, women are 4 times more likely than general population to be victims of rape. And we mentioned a little bit earlier, 1 of 5 adults live with mental illness. That doesn't even scrape the surface of all the other statistics that are out there. It literally like squeezes my heart to hear some of this stuff. And honestly, if you're listening to this episode, you likely have fallen into one of these categories. And if you haven't, someone you know and you consider within that circle that you have, the 5 people that you spend the most time with, one of them is likely a part of this statistic. And I think that that is one of the hardest things for us to understand emotionally and accept. And I think that I know that the more that we actually start talking about this stuff, the more that, or the less that it happens, the less that when it does happen, or if someone does experience it, the less likely someone is to feel alone, the less likely there is a perpetration of that or perpetuity of that, because this is cyclical. Behaviors are cyclical sometimes. And I know that we can create a brighter future without and improve these statistics, meaning have less of this. Because it's like, what breakdown needs to happen in order for this to even just, be something that we're living with and being okay with, and I'm not saying that anyone listening to this episode is living with this and being okay with it. But what I am saying is, do you know what happened to you? Have you, like many of us, myself included, turned a blind eye to what has happened because of some of the things that Bianca said earlier? Well, it wasn't this, so it must not be that. Well, it didn't look like that, so therefore it's, not worthy of talking about. Oh, well, because all of my friends experienced this, mine isn't that big of a deal.
Or the fact that the people in our life explicitly deny what happened, or they'll explicitly not want to hear about it. One of my clients told me that someone told her that she was a parasite because of her mental health and her mental health challenges, and that she was like sucking the life out of everyone around her because of her mental illness and the struggles that she had, because she was sexually assaulted from the time she was 2 years old by multiple different people and had massive experiences of trauma happen to her. So what happens when you hear something like that? Now that's extreme, but what happens when you hear something like that? You start to develop a belief that you're not allowed to talk about what's going on with you, that you're the problem. And that's why people are likely to engage in self-harm or to attempt self-injurious behavior or to make an attempt at suicide. We are so shamed into not talking about what happened to us for a number of reasons, and then it perpetuates the cycle.
Yeah.
There's so many people who are suffering. There are so many people who are struggling. And you and I talk to them every single day.
Every day.
Every single one of my clients, I no exaggeration, every single one of them has said something along the lines of, I was told to not talk about it.
Yeah.
I was told I'm too much. I was put down. I was, villainized or made out to be like a helpless victim for talking about what's wrong with me, for what I'm going through. Every single one. I have over 50 clients. Yeah. And that's just the people that I'm seeing. How many people out there are being told, you don't matter, what you experienced didn't matter, oh, well, don't talk about it, just be happy. Oh, well, it's in the past. It's like, no, your past carries in with your brain to the present and to the future. Like, it's not in the past, not unless you work through it.
Facts.
Hey everybody, I just want to take a minute to talk about my experience with the Evolve Venture Society. They're a wonderful group of people who allow you to communicate in an open and honest way, and they're very supportive and full of positive energy. You can ask anyone for help. You can talk to anyone and ask for questions, and they're very supportive. And all they do is just help you to become the best version of yourself. And if anything, all I want to do is just learn more from this amazing group of people, and I think that they will help anybody who needs it, and that's the best thing that anybody can ask for.
That's the thing that I think a lot of what I've learned, and there's a lot of interesting research underneath this that supports this, is how few, like, if you're not aware of neurochemistry and how events impact, right? Like if you got bit by a dog, let's just say that if you actually were someone who got bit by a dog when you were 5 years old, why do you think when you're 6, 7, 8, even 20 years old, you still don't really love dogs? Even though intellectually you're like, okay, yeah, I don't really, like dogs are cute and stuff, but I just don't like them. Why is that? Well, it's because your neurochemistry rearranged at that one moment, that one event when that dog bit you. If that happens with a dog biting you, or something like a hand on the stove when you're a toddler, and whew, ouch, right? Your brain learns, and your brain carries those lessons, those learnings, the pain, the suffering, the challenges that you've had with you. So the neurochemistry is coming into your day-to-day on the every single day-to-day, unless you decide to rewire your brain. And this is where so few people have an understanding that things are carrying with us. We all refer to it as baggage. Oh, that person has too much baggage or whatever. But like, I was talking to someone, and I got a message from someone recently who's a partner of someone who struggles with depression. And they had talked about it as if it was something to just get over, as if that individual had a choice, which helped me see how little awareness this individual, the partner, has around what the neurochemistry we're talking about is involved here. It's not just something you just like, close a book and put to the side. You just get over, and I think that that's a fundamental misunderstanding, not just with depression. I'm just giving that example, but with our own brains and how they work and what happens to us and how that impacts us and what that does and how that carries with us.
I'm so glad you said that. The amount of times I've had to tell my client your depression is like cancer, because they think we have this narrative that, and this is why mental health is so taboo and why it's so stigmatized against, because we believe that, your mental health is just something that you did to yourself and you need to just get yourself out of it. That, oh, you're just lazy, or, you're just sad. Get
Just
over it.
dramatic, just so
Yeah, you're being
emotional. Yeah.
dramatic. Oh, it happened in the past. Get over it already. Like, there is so much animosity to people struggling with mental health and with mental health challenges and mental illness. And you and I have had many dialogues on the podcast about it. It's because of the language surrounding it.
I know.
When
I was just
everyone
at
is
a,
saying they're depressed when they're just sad, you're not
yeah,
depressed. You're sad. Depression
yeah,
is real. But when
yeah,
we start overusing the language, we minimize the experience of it. Depression
mm,
is severe. The amount of
mm-hmm.
people who end up completing suicide who are diagnosed with depression is alarming. It's not just being sad.
Yeah,
Social
so
anxiety
anxiety.
is not just a little nerves. Social anxiety can get so debilitating that you end up developing agoraphobia where you cannot leave your house.
Yeah.
Trauma is not just something that happened to you. It is a catastrophic event that literally changes the way that your brain is formed, and it changes every experience you have thereafter and the way that your body works.
Yeah.
Mental illness is not a choice. It is not something that you just can get over. And when
Yeah.
we can start having dialogues of the fact that mental illness is just as real as a medical condition like cancer,
Mm-hmm.
like diabetes, you would never say to a diabetic, "Oh, you're fine. Oh, you have diabetes. Oh, that's sad." Like, we would
Yeah.
never do that to someone like that. We would never say, "Oh, it's fine, just get over it." But we say
Right.
that about mental illness because there's such little awareness around it. And then because of that, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to make a joke about it because it's easier to make jokes about it than it is to actually acknowledge I am severely depressed.
Yeah.
I have trauma from when I was a child that I cannot get over.
Yeah.
I have debilitating anxiety. I can't leave my house.
Mm-hmm.
These issues are real, and the less we're able to talk about it, the more this is going to happen, and the more suicide rates there's going to be, the more domestic violence there's going to be. This is why everyone got so screwed up in COVID when the
Oh, yeah.
pandemic happened, because we
Oh,
all
yeah.
had to actually face our shit for the first time. You couldn't leave your house and run away from it. A lot of people were stuck at home with their perpetrator. So
Mm-hmm.
the incidence of violence went up, the incidence of suicide went up.
Mm-hmm.
All of these mental health challenges skyrocketed during COVID because none of us had our vices anymore.
And we weren't able to run away. And here's the thing too. It's like
Exactly.
when things happen to you as well, it increases your predisposition for your brain to be constantly on alert. And that increases your hormones around like cortisol and norepinephrine, all of those ones that keep you in an adrenaline state. Like how many of us have been in survival mode after COVID, right? Like, and how many of us are starting to maybe shift gears. It's fascinating the amount of conversations that have come into the fold of like, where's your stress level at? Like, just where's your stress level at? Because honestly, it just continues to get higher and higher. And what are the chances that it's actually connected to things that happened to you in the past that you have not actually had a space and adaptively coped with, processed through, and started to accept and integrate into who you are? Now, here's the thing, what's interesting about trauma and all the things that we talked about, it can rewire you, but that doesn't mean it has to define who you are and who you continue to be. And that's where I think the work that we do at Evolve is so empowering, because it, number one, accepts people for where they are and where they're at and what was never acknowledged. And then on top of that, once you've gone to that space, it allows you the opportunity to recognize that that doesn't have to define you forever. And for some of us who think that it does, it's just a whole different thing when you have a space, when you have a circle that is just not trauma informed, that is just not mental health aware, right? Even to the ends of stress and what that impact is on your neurochemical components. Like, it's just, we're so charged up. It's that thing that really does need to get talked about more. We think about our physical health, we think about our spiritual health, we think about our, emotional health. How many of us are taking into account and taking just as seriously going to therapy or getting coaching as we are maybe our dentist appointments, our eye appointments, our, I don't know, whatever appointments, the other appointments that are on your calendar that you dread, but are super important to do for your health? What degree of that are you taking in a proactive measure to actually acknowledge what happened to you, what acknowledge to your peers, what happened to the people that you surround yourself with every single day? And how are you contributing to this problem of suffering and quiet and don't say anything, hush hush around this topic? Or how are you being someone who is leading that charge in the uncomfortable conversations by holding space, by talking about the hard stuff, by saying and just holding space for like whatever did happen, let's talk about it.
I'm literally shaking. My entire body is like,
yeah, you can tell we're a little passionate about this.
How can you not be when you hear the stats around it, though? Like,
I know.
Actually, you know what? I know how you can not be, because it's easier to avoid. And we just did an episode on this about, which one was it? 276, loss isn't easy. We literally talked in that episode that we run away from hard things as a society, as human beings. Like, it's not just like, oh, one culture and the other. It's like, no, as human beings, we run away from hard things.
That's called
we run
psychology.
away from uncomfortable things. Yeah. We don't like facing hard things. We'd rather make a joke out of it. We'd rather just talk about the sports and the Super Bowl and whatever, rather than talking about the real things, the real shit that is going on behind closed doors. You and I were just talking about somebody and we were looking at their social media. And this is someone who's an influencer and has a really big following of people. This woman is severely depressed and I don't even have to talk to her to know it. She's had so much work done to herself. She's very clearly struggling with anorexia.
Yeah.
But she puts on this massive facade of, I'm an empowering coach and I'm this and I'm that. No, you're not. No, you're not. You are struggling severely, but you won't talk about it. You don't have the courage to talk about it. And then other people are looking up to you. You're causing harm. And there's so many people like this. We all have this facade on social media, but then you see the person behind the scenes and they are severely depressed or they are severely traumatized. And you and I are always the person that they talk to about it. We see what the real stuff behind the scenes, but then they look fine on their social media. And it's like, what are you doing? But this is
I
our
know.
culture. This is
I
everybody.
know.
This is everybody. You have to talk about what happened to you. Now, granted, to the right person at the right time. Not
Yes.
everybody deserves to hear your truth. Not everybody deserves to hear your story. And Brene Brown talks about that. She said,
Man.
vulnerability and courage is not sharing your truth with everybody. It's sharing your truth with the people who have earned the right to hear it.
Man, I wish I heard
Not
that
every,
very young. Oh gosh,
same,
that would save me so
same.
much pain. Because I shared like who I was and all of those like really vulnerable things with people just who never earned it, in hindsight. And it just made things worse. It made my trauma worse. They contributed to it. It just, yeah.
These cycles will not end until we have the courage to talk about them. And I know for most of us, it is really scary and you're not ready yet. And that's okay. But that's why Emilia and I are here to do that and to help you get started. We are both survivors of sexual assault. We are both, people who have struggled with mental health challenges and mental illness. And I still struggle with depression. It's something I struggle with every single day. And I'm working through it. And I'm very open about it on my social media. I talk about it all the time. There has to be people like Emilia and I talking about it. There have to be more people talking about it because this is how the cycle ends. This is how, Emilia and I do what we say in the intro of helping people by breaking one limiting belief at a time. This is how we do that. So I hope that this episode fired you up. If you're not struggling with mental illness, I celebrate you. I'm so happy for you. And it is your responsibility to help the people around you. Whether it's even just being a light and being a place for people to go. Not that you have to take on everyone's stuff, but
Mm-mm.
just to be, a bright light.
Yeah.
We all have a duty to each other to help each other. This is how we start breaking cycles.
Hell yeah. Oh man. This is it. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for listening to the rant. I'm grateful
Yeah,
for this.
seriously.
Our
I
goal
went
was to
off.
spread
I'm sorry.
awareness.
I'm not sorry,
No,
but I'm
don't be
sorry.
sorry.
But I'm not.
Our goal was to spread awareness, and what better way than to have that spreading be emotionally charged with experience. It's like at the end of the day, like, man, people are not keeping it real around here in this arena, and Bianca and I are just so fed up with not with the lack of that. And so that's why we do what we do. That's why we try to keep it as real and as raw as possible. And if you've been to our community events, if you've been a part of the Evolve community, we celebrate and appreciate you for having the courage to maybe be that black sheep of the family, to where you're actually starting to spread awareness, where you're actually starting to lead by example, set boundaries, work through your emotions, work with your limiting beliefs, work with your challenges, because that is the leadership that your family, your generation, like all of that, people are looking up to you. And I'll just end with this. The world needs you in that. So my episode suggestion is 231 Motivation Monday, how to trust yourself again. Oftentimes, the reason why I put that, oftentimes when I speak to people who are struggling in this arena at accepting actually what had happened to them, they lose trust in themselves, because let's say, for example, it's either a domestic violence case, or they had experienced assault, or they had been raped, or maybe they're struggling with their high functioning anxiety. They like start to not trust themselves after certain events. And that's one of the things that starts to really break down so much of what I have seen can be earned back, because we don't recognize when we're just stopping to trust ourselves. Maybe something happened to us that was not within our control. We start to shame and blame ourselves for that, and we erode the trust that we have with ourselves. And so I think that will be a really great episode for anyone who maybe has had something happen to them and they have experienced that. And I think that would be a good jump off point. B.
140, you are not defined by your trauma.
Oh.
Guys, please reach out. If you are struggling, if you're suffering, please reach out. If it's not to us, then to someone else. But I would highly recommend us. A little biased, but we have personal experience in this, and we also have the clinical backing. So if you are struggling, please reach out. You do not have to suffer alone.
Definitely.
All right. Have a great week. Do some self-care after this episode. I know I'm going to.
For sure.
Go do some self-care. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.